You are watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV from Toronto, Ontario. I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Up next, how to support single families in our Muslim community. We'll talk to ZAHIRAH EPPARD, Director of Education from SOUNDVISION. But first, some news headlines. Calls for changes in temporary foreign worker program. Inspirit Foundation selects Muslim creatives for Narrative Change Lab. ISCC constructs first mosque in Paris, Ontario. Anger in India over release of gang rape convicts. Now the details. Sean Fraser, Federal Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Minister, says that Canada's temporary foreign worker program needs to change to protect workers' rights, reports a media source. Fraser's statement comes after the news of problems at a farming company in Prince Edward Island has captured the attention of the media. A new permit program designed to help workers leave employers who maltreat them has seen 22 workers leave a single farm. Fraser says that the employers using the program should be held accountable. So far, no company has faced repercussions for allowing so many workers to leave. Inspirit Foundation, a funding body for media, arts and social change, has selected 17 Canadian Muslims to join its inaugural cohort for its Narrative Change Lab. The lab aims to promote new pop culture narratives for marginalized Canadians. For 5 months, the cohort, which includes Muslim journalists, writers and content creatives, will work on designing narratives that reflect Canadian Muslim experiences. Formed 2 years ago, the lab actively seeks creators from BIPOC communities so that they can challenge the norms in media and arts and help create a pluralistic Canada. The Muslim community in Paris, Ontario, is constructing its first mosque, Jamia Masjid Sayyidina Bilal. The mosque will be affiliated with the Islamic Supreme Council of Canada, also known as ISCC. The mosque will cater to the religious needs of the Muslim community in Paris and its surrounding areas. The ISCC was formed in June 2000 in Calgary and serves Muslims of all denominations. So far, the ISCC has constructed 23 mosques during the last 13 years. ISCC also runs 5 food banks in different cities and is working on a cemetery project in Calgary. Indian human rights groups and Muslim representatives are expressing outrage over the release of 11 men serving life sentences for gang rape and murder during the 2002 Gujarat riots. The riots killed over 1,000 people, the majority of whom were minority Muslims. The then 21-year-old Bilkis Bano was gang raped, and 14 members of her family, including her 3-year-old daughter, were massacred by the mob. The 11 convicts were released Monday from jail. The authorities had approved their appeal to reduce their life sentences. Gujarat is the home state of Bharatiya Janata Party Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was the state's chief minister at the time. He has been accused of not doing enough to stop the killings. And that's it for the news. Single-parent families are a growing percentage of our community, and whether it's through divorce or widowhood or immigration employment separation, in the US, about 80% of those are women, according to a latest statistic. And to talk to us today about the single-parent families in the Muslim community, we are joined by ZAHIRAH EPPARD, Director of Religious Education from SOUNDVISION Foundation. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Walaikum assalam. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. A regular guest. You have a weekly newsletter and we tap in once a month to one of the topics. And today we're going to be looking at single-parent families. Tell us a little bit about the phenomenon in the Muslim community.
Well, there certainly are a growing number of single-parent families, and one of the challenges in the Muslim community is that there is often a ton of stigma attached to single parenting. Now, many people end up single parents without that being in their control. They are widowed, they sometimes are divorced. And sometimes even converts come into Islam when they are already single parents. So we find that there needs to be awareness raised in the Muslim community about supporting these families and removing the stigma attached.
I know that sociologists track something called female-headed households, and it's due to globalization and the employment situation where a husband might not be able to get work in Canada, for example, but can get it in the Gulf. And so the families are separated by that. And you mentioned already widow and divorce. What do you think you mentioned stigma. Is that the biggest challenge facing these families?
I think it's really twofold. We have to provide emotional support to women who are already struggling. We know parenting is difficult, but the challenges become compounded when you're doing that alone. And we also know that many times when families are headed by single mothers, their income status drops, and that often puts them very close to the poverty line in many countries. And so not only are they struggling on a wide variety of levels with just juggling the sheer magnitude of the work that needs to be done to maintain a family, but there's also financial challenges as well.
So you mentioned those challenges. I wonder if we could just dive a little bit deeper into this problem of stigma. I've noticed that in relation to divorced people wanting to remarry, but I didn't think it extended to just single parent families in particular.
Well, there is a difficult time in the Muslim community, sometimes talking about and supporting any things that are challenging. Mental health issues, we just did an issue on raising awareness for mental health. That's another huge area. But remember, around marriage, there is a phenomenon where Muslims seem to not be welcoming divorcees into the field of possible candidates when they're thinking about marriage for their children, or when parents are single, be they men or women, they sometimes have a hard time finding another spouse, wanting another spouse, and finding it because they already have children.
One of the things that struck me about the newsletter were the stories about single mothers in Muslim history, and even going far back to the Quranic story of Maryam, the mother of Jesus. May Allah be pleased with her. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because is that an anachronistic way of talking about her as a single mother? It kind of struck me.
Well, I think what we have to do is we have to often delve back into Islamic history to look to contemporary challenges. There were many women that raised, children by themselves. Even the Prophet Muhammad's mother, Amina, raised him for 6 years until she died as a single parent. And again, she was widowed. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ never knew his father. And so there are other famous scholars. Abu Hurairah's mother raised him for a large portion of his life as a single parent. And we know that the story of Miriam also demonstrates how difficult the society in general, how difficult a time they have accepting single parenthood, and how much stigma sometimes is also placed on, parents who have children when they are by themselves.
How does that affect the children themselves?
Well, the children, if they're stigmatized in a community, they feel that directly and indirectly. One of the articles that we included in this issue was about what we do in our communities to support single parent families. And remember, when I say this, I'm not talking about only single mothers. I'm talking about single parents, single fathers too. But there are often financial, physical, emotional, and spiritual challenges that we can support in our Islamic communities. One of the things that I've heard many times people complain about, I used to be the principal of a very large Islamic school in my area, is the zakat application process. The process is often very convoluted. People are looked at with suspicion. suspicion rather than welcomed and provided with assistance. And sometimes the information they share is not kept confidential. Well, if those kinds of things, zakat, now remember, zakat is a requirement. If those kinds of things are things that we are providing in the community, if we're not doing it in a way that's welcoming, timely, and confidential, then we're not providing even the support that we think we're providing. Then we can go down the list and look at other things like providing programs that might support housing, might support.
Well, let's just pause a minute and talk a little bit more about that zakat issue, although it's not really our topic, but I am aware of the transition in zakat practices. Those organizations that take a more social work approach or a psychological approach tend to be more empathetic and beneficial to the recipient rather than the organizations that are taking, if you like, an accounting approach. Here's the money, do you meet the criterion and hand it out?
Right. I like your idea about talking about social work, because sometimes we think that all that we need to do is throw money a certain way. Social workers are very good at finding resources in the community that might be outside of the Muslim community as well. And we should all be tapping into those resources. Our taxes are paying for them. So.
Well, you were just beginning to sort of give a list of things that the community can do to support single parent families. And you mentioned this issue of looking more closely at the zakat practices, and then you were going to mention some others. So just mention another.
So some of the larger communities provide food pantries, making sure that families have food security is very important. Some also provide short-term loans or grants to purchase things like a car or do car repairs, which are big ticket items. Some larger communities also provide medical treatment if you don't have health insurance or you're struggling with very large medical expenses. That particular area can drown a family that's already struggling financially. Can I talk just for a second about education too? Because in this area, I think it's very important to make sure that families of all kinds are supported and served by the Muslim community. If we provide Islamic education programs, making sure there's scholarships available if the families can't pay the regular tuition fees, or making sure that there are halaqas, regular halaqas in the community that can address these kinds of issues and provide support groups of all different kinds for families.
Well, we're wrapping up now with about 1 minute left. And the things that you've just mentioned, zakat and housing and education and food hampers, help any person who's in need, financial need. Can you just finish off by focusing it on single parent families, like something particularly that we can do to support them?
So remember, if there aren't two people supporting either income stability or just childcare in general, everything is made harder. So providing childcare or even preschool childcare in our communities is very helpful. Keeping a resource bank of local businesses that support all of the needs of families, and this will help single families too, is very helpful. Tapping into the local resources, as I've mentioned, because many of the municipalities or states provide lots of different resource programs for families who are struggling financially, and making sure that we keep everyone welcomed in the community. I know that there are times when children struggle. They often are, misbehave. They often, come into the masjid. They're very active. They're happy to see people, but they're met sometimes with disdain instead of a welcoming smile. So we can do a ton just to welcome and support one another. To when we ask how you're doing, mean that you're interested in hearing, and if you can help them, send that.
That's it. We're out of time, but good final words. Basically, just be nice to each other. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it was always nice to be here. Thank you for supporting the newsletter, and I hope the audience keeps reading.
Thank you for watching. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe, and God bless.